In The Moral Landscape and in related presentations, Sam Harris has attempted to propound an objective science of morality, carving a third way between secularists who say that morality is subjective and religionists who say that morality depends on God. But Sam Harris's philosophy, such as it is, reduces down to little more than utilitarianism, which is a widely debunked philosophical framework because it can lead to repugnant conclusions. It doesn't seem to capture the nature of morality. Actions seem to have moral weight in and of themselves, not merely due to their consequences. Whereas Sam Harris presents morality as that which leads to the greatest good, the greatest human well-being. This doesn't seem to work. Harris is attacking the idea that you can't get from an is to an ought, and that the methods of science which describe reality can't tell us about the way things should be. The idea comes from Hume, that you can't get from a description of the way things are to a statement about the way things should be. It's a compelling argument, but it does seem like there's ways around it. Unfortunately, Harris doesn't seem to have really found them. To me, it seems as though there are, in fact, objective, moral facts. They don't exist out there in the world, and you can't discover them through the scientific method. No scientific instrument can detect these. They don't seem to exist in the physical universe, but seem to come into being by virtue of the fact that we are conscious agents, at least if we have free will. Now, the free will debate is a fraught one, but I'd like to sidestep it for the purposes of this discussion by saying if we don't have free will, these questions become irrelevant. And if free will is an illusion, it still seems as though we're compelled to act as though we did have choice. It certainly seems that we have choice. And there's the position of the compatibilists who don't think that determinism means we don't have free will anyway. If, for instance, there were in fact no causality in the world, it doesn't seem like you could have free will because consequences would not follow from causes and you wouldn't be able to take actions and have consistent outcomes. Your choices could be undone. So choice seems to, in some sense, depend on causality. Anyway, that's as much as I'm going to say about that. I want to look at the existence or pertinence of moral facts. See, because we're conscious agents, we have this capacity to make choices. This apparent capacity to make choices. And not only is it a capacity, but it's an inescapable reality of our experience. Every moment that we're conscious, we're compelled to make choices. It's impossible to avoid. And it's this inescapability which makes me think there are objective moral facts that can be derived. This doesn't mean there's any clear moral code immediately apparent, but it's precisely this uncertainty which seems to me to bring into being certain higher level moral facts that can be derived therefrom. As the question arises, what do you do in the face of uncertainty? We don't know whether there are in fact objective moral truths, if there is such a thing as right and wrong in the way that we conduct ourselves. So, if you're a nihilist, you could simply say there is no meaning, there is no truth, there are no values that have any objective significance, and so you can do whatever you want. And this is a positive claim in its own right, and it requires evidence, and the evidence doesn't seem to stack up. See, nihilism is based on skepticism, it's disbelief. But if you're skeptical, that means not believing things without evidence, and that means not immediately jumping to the conclusion of nihilism, of just dismissing all meaning because it seems like there's not enough evidence to support it. Instead, the response to uncertainty should be the attempt to discover new meaning. And how can you do that? Well, when you lack certainty, you require more information. And you also need to act with caution. There may or may not be moral facts that pertain, and you may or may not be doing the right or wrong thing at any moment, so you should tread carefully. This leads to a first principle of something similar to the Hippocratic Oath, like first, do no harm. Tread carefully. Try not to cause wanton destruction and suffering merely for the sake of it. The second principle is to take into account the available information. This means that there's a positive value judgment towards the external environment and to other conscious beings, because these seem to be the primary source of information, apart from your own capacity for introspection. By witnessing the world around us, we can find out more than we knew before, and by listening to others, we can find out things that we didn't think of ourselves. So when you look at the environment, and when you look and listen at other conscious beings, there seem to be certain clear things that they're expressing. People and other conscious beings, such as animals, seem to clearly express suffering. It's readily understandable, even when they're not capable of language. People beg for mercy and compassion. Animals cry out in pain. They're clearly expressing a negative value judgment towards whatever it is that is causing them their suffering. And this is pertinent information. It's not absolute proof of anything, but it has probative force. It's evidence in some direction that this is the wrong thing to be doing, at least so far as those people are concerned. And remember, we have no certainty about anything. So the correct response is not to dismiss things, but to listen and to pay attention. So already, just from considering uncertainty and from realizing the inescapable nature of your own choice-making capacity, you gain a few values. You get the idea that you should conduct yourself carefully in the world. You get a value of compassion, where you should listen to the expressed suffering of other conscious beings, take it into account. You get reverence for the environment to some extent, even though that's a loaded term. You get the idea of conservationism, at least, because the environment is the source of so much complexity and irreplaceable information that if you conduct yourself in an environmentally destructive manner and pollute and destroy the environment, you're destroying information that you may be unable to retrieve later. So I think you can get an objective set of values to a certain extent. And to me, these can be enumerated in a pretty short list. First, be careful. Second, listen to others. Respect alternative points of view and don't just favor your own because it's the most immediately accessible to you. Take into account others' perspectives. Treat them with respect and compassion. Listen to their suffering and try to relieve it. Treat the environment with care. Try and protect it. Work in such a way as to improve the environment over time rather than destroy it. Don't just blindly extract resources. And lastly, how should you treat yourself? You yourself are trapped in suffering and deserve dignity and respect and should be treated with the same degree of compassion as any other suffering being. So, my final point when discussing objective moral facts is that you shouldn't discount yourself. You should treat all suffering beings and animals with kindness. And nobody knows your own needs as well as you do. Nobody has the immediate access to your own mind that you have. So, you should treat yourself with kindness, compassion, and respect. Just the same as you should all other beings who are compelled to exist in this dangerous and chaotic world.